Hey everyone, this is Sean in St. Louis, and welcome back to the Marketing Gateway. And man, I told you we were going to hit the ground running after we got past episode 100, and we have yet another great interview to share with you today. In fact, it's going to be in two parts because we could not stop talking. We had such a great time going back and forth about all of these different marketing topics, and that's because I was talking to Dr. Perry Drake. Now, I had heard his name before. I had not had to meet Perry prior to just a couple of days ago. We had a conversation, and he's going to reference it a lot because it was such a good conversation that we went on for quite a while. And then I ran into him yesterday in person at the American Marketing Association conference, which this episode will go out about a week after when that conference was. But we got to see each other in person too. So we've become fast friends, and you'll see that in the interview. But one of the reasons why is because we have a lot in common in terms of our desire to see the St. Louis area marketing community grow. And both of us have different roles in the academic world. He is the chair and associate teaching professor of marketing and entrepreneurship at UMSL, the University of Missouri St. Louis. And, of course, I am an adjunct faculty member at SIUE, Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville. So we both have that. And he's also got a lot of practical experience working in the field of marketing, and not here in St. Louis, but in New York City, which he's going to talk about. So he is able to draw on a considerable amount of experience, knowledge, expertise, and also connections with other people. And that's another thing that we're going to talk about. Now, part of the reason why I wanted to get him on the show so quickly and why we're going to break this into two parts is because he's going to talk about the conference that he puts on every year, which is called the Midwest Digital Marketing Conference, or the MDMC. And their website is bestmarketingconference.com. Okay. So you need to check that out. You need to go there. I'm going to be there. He's going to be there. And I'm going to talk about it again at the end, and he's going to talk about it too. But this is a really, really cool conference. It's not that expensive. There's going to be lots of people there from all kinds of different disciplines, not just digital marketing. But what you're going to learn and take away is going to be so great. Now, this interview is not a commercial for that. However, I do want you to consider going to it, because when you hear the level of expertise from Perry Drake in this particular interview, you're going to go, yeah, I want to hear more of this kind of stuff. And that's where you're going to find it. With that said, let's get the interview started. Hey, everyone, it's Sean in St. Louis, and I have Dr. Perry Drake with me here today. Perry, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for inviting me, Sean. I'm thrilled to be here.
And we're just excited because you're going to talk about something later on the episode that's coming up later this month. And I want to make sure people pay attention for that. So we'll get to that in just a moment. But first of all, I ask every guest, whenever we start, tell me something surprising I don't know. And it could be anything that you'd like to share.
Okay. And as I talked to you prior, there's three quick things I want to say. The one thing I want to say, which most people don't know, and I do talk to my students about it, is I started working when I was 14 and 15 here in St. Louis. My mom actually did payroll at Grants Farm. So everybody came into the office. She gave everybody their paycheck. She was there for about 12, 15 years. At the age of 14 and 15, because I was underage, she got me the job. I got paid out of petty cash, but I was the gatekeeper of the goats, where you go in and feed the baby bottles to the goats. So I actually was the guy for the summer of when I was 14, summer when I was 15, responsible for keeping those gates behind the fence. And what's funny is I just went back there last year with my fiance, and it's changed a lot kind of in that whole little animal petting area. But it was funny. I got off on talking to the girl that was the gatekeeper then, that I used to be the gatekeeper, 50 years ago or whatever, which was kind of cool. So that's just one thing I like to kind of tell and talk about. And then the other thing is you always see me in my tags. These are my dad's. And when he died in 1987, I have been wearing these tags every single day. He was stationed over in France back when everything was occurring over there. And just a touching thing for me that I like to share, because some people think they're my tags. They're not. They're my dad's, and just kind of something special. But that's really, I mean, the other thing I can mention, Sean, which you probably don't know, I know other people do, but not everybody. I was also in a motorcycle accident 4 years ago, broke both wrists. So I had both arms in a cast. And yeah, that was crazy, crazy times. Luckily, we were kind of in COVID, so I was teaching remotely, so I could kind of get around with kind of pecking on the computer with a finger here and there. But I have since sold my Harley, so that is no more. But anyway, those are three things. I know you only asked for one, but yeah.
That's you know what? It's good to bring a surprise where you're like, I'm going to surprise you with three things because that's surprising in and of itself. But
When you asked me yesterday, or when we talked yesterday, or the day
Mhm.
before, that I'm going to ask you this, I'm like, okay, what am I going to talk about? And then it's like, oh my goodness, I have three things. But yeah, thanks,
That's
Sean.
fantastic. Well, I'm a military brat myself. My father was in the Air Force. He's
Okay,
still
yeah,
alive, but he's
yeah,
out now. But I appreciate that devotion to your father, and
right,
thanks for sharing that because that's really
yeah,
special and important.
yeah. Thank you. Yeah,
Well, in this series on the Marketing Gateway, we're really focused on the St. Louis area. So tell me a little bit about how you came to live and work in the St. Louis area. And it sounds like you grew up here, right? So,
yeah. When we were chatting the other day, I did grow up here. I went to high school here. I'm not going to tell you which high school. The viewers can guess. And I actually went to UMSL, which is where I'm a professor now. And then went to Iowa for my grad degree, and then moved out to New York. And then after about 28 years, Sean, of living in New York City, and I think you've got relatives that are out that
mhm.
way, it's kind of an exhausting environment. It's 24/7. You're on top of people all the time. Great. I wouldn't change a thing. Uh, my wife and I, 2013, decided to move back. And part of the reason, too, was my mother was kind of ill at the time. She ended up dying before we got back here, but I was kind of hoping to get moved back here so I could maybe help a little bit with that. But anyway, that's kind of what brought me back full circle. No regrets on leaving New York and coming back to St. Louis. It was the best thing that ever happened to me, and being a part of this whole community that you and I were dealing with yesterday at the AMA
Yeah.
meeting. The whole thing. It's a very vibrant, fun community, really.
Yeah. And for listeners, we were at the AMA conference yesterday, American Marketing Association St.
Right,
Louis chapter. And we're going to talk a little bit later about some other conferences that are going on. And, it's always great to get together and see people in person,
right,
because you just have these great conversations and encounters. One thing I want to mention about New York. So my brother-in-law, as you mentioned, he
right.
lives in Queens. Some of the time he has a place up in Albany when he's tired of the city. But when we were visiting them, I was really surprised at how important parking spaces are because anytime we made a decision to go anywhere, they
Right,
had to think about, do we want to risk losing our parking spot or not?
right,
And
right.
when we would
Oh
get
yeah.
back, like there was a whole ordeal about making sure they
Right.
got their parking spot back. So,
Right, right, right. Well, I think a little different in the boroughs. We were specifically in Manhattan, but you're absolutely, I
yeah.
mean, we were paying, I mean, I told you there towards the end,
Mhm.
our last 5 years there, we had no cars because we got tired. I mean, we were paying like 800 a month for a parking space in a garage. I mean, it
Wow.
was just, that's what you paid for rent back then here. And no, I totally hear you. It's like, yeah, everything's very precious that way. Right.
It's very different from St. Louis
Oh
that
yeah.
way. Well,
Yeah.
speaking of St. Louis, what's something about the St. Louis area that you wish other people knew?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think those that aren't from here or aren't familiar with it, and I think we talked about that as well, is it is really family friendly. It really, really is. It's very affordable. There are so many things to do for free here in St. Louis. All the art museums, the zoo, which I think is rated one of the top 10 zoos in the country. We got the botanical gardens. I mean, there is just so much here. And I don't think people realize that, and we're very community based. And I think the other thing that I'll say, which I don't want to dwell on it in a negative sense, but I think sometimes the crime rate is looked at inappropriately. The vast majority of the areas are ultra safe. It's really dealing
Mhm.
with the city and the east side of the river as well, which kind of causes problems with our stats and how those look outwardly.
For sure.
And I wish kind of people understood that, but I think it's just the way we're kind of the city surrounded by a county, and it's just all the stats get intermingled, so to speak. But yeah, I mean, like I said, living in New York, loved it, wouldn't change a thing, dealing with the cultural diversity, all that sort of stuff, but love coming back to St. Louis and just feeling a little cozier, so to speak. Kind of, yeah.
So I have to ask you because I,
Right.
I love pizza. Like, are you a New York pizza fan or a St. Louis style pizza fan, or do you like them both? Or
Well, I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm a St. Louis pizza fan. I've always loved. I don't know if you remember Cusinelli's. Cusinelli's
Mhm.
is similar to Emo's. They've shut down, but I've always been the provolone sort of cheese guy. But that's not to say I didn't like, New York style pizza. But I did enjoy coming back and embarking and partaking in Emo's once again. But yeah.
That's fantastic. You could not find emos
Yeah,
in New
yeah.
York. It would be
Well, did
heresy
you?
to them.
Well, I mean, obviously, you go visit your brother on occasion. What do you prefer? Do you like the New York
I I
style?
like the Neapolitan style, so the New York
Okay.
style is good for me. But what I love in New York is that you can go anywhere and get a slice of pizza any time of
Oh, oh.
day.
Well, pre-COVID, I don't know what it is now, but I have not been back since
Mhm.
COVID. But what you could get a slice and a Coke for like 250 or
Yeah.
whatever. I don't know what it is now. And you'd have people in line, waiting at their favorite pizza place just to, just kind of walk in the front door and get your pizza. Yeah, totally different world.
I,
Yeah.
I stopped at a pizza joint right next to Times Square, and I walked outside. I was eating my slice, and there's this
Right.
big crowd, and Scarlett Johansson was there standing.
There
She had
you
come out of
go.
one of the
Yeah.
theaters,
Right.
and
Right.
one of the things I remember about that was how short she was. And I thought that's really strange. I've never seen her in person, and wow, she's a
Right.
lot
Right.
shorter than I thought she was. So
Yeah.
New York,
Yeah.
you just get those experiences. But
You never know. You never know. Yeah.
well, a good thing about what you and I do is sometimes we get to travel, and you're an
Right.
academic now, so you get to see the world. But you didn't always start on the track of being an academic.
Right.
You got to work in the marketing field for a while. So tell me a
Right.
little bit about your background and what you were doing in marketing before you got the doctor added to your name.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting, and I didn't really fill you in on this the other day when we were chatting.
Hmm.
I am kind of a statistician, a data guy underneath. That's what I got my master's in. And the reason I went that route was I think it was in 1984, the New York Times had written an article that big data was going to be the thing. So those that knew how to analyze data were going to be really well suited for the future world. And I enjoyed all of my analytical classes at UMSL and calculus. I excelled in all those. And so that's my wife and I at the time, we decided to pursue that as our master's degrees. So I was actually a biostatistician for the first year and a half of my life at Ciba-Geigy. And we talked about it, Voltaren,
Hmm.
which you see all over the news now to rub all over your knees for arthritis. That was one of the drugs I did the efficacy study for back in like 1987. So it was weird starting to see the drug show up on TV. It's like, oh my goodness, I did the efficacy study for that. But as you could tell, I'm, like you, very outgoing, love to meet
Hmm.
people. Just being a statistician was not cutting it for me. I felt like I really needed to get pulled into the world of marketing. And so the Reader's Digest offered me a job, which again, for the younger kids out there, they don't know the Digest was the ultimate publisher of the day. I mean, they had a humongous database. And Sean, literally, if I went to a conference back then, I was with them 11, 12 years. We really were not allowed to talk to anybody about our proprietary techniques of segmenting and targeting and testing of different copy approaches, all of that sort of thing. They're the ones that came up with the old penny in the envelope, if you remember that as the door opener. Kids don't even know the concept of what I'm saying now, I'm sure. But, that was the whole gimmick. You put a penny through a window and that gets the person to open the envelope. Um, and that was a game changer for me. I mean, I learned so much from the digest because they were the premier marketer. And then kind of what happened was NYU was just starting a program in integrated marketing, a master's degree integrated marketing program. I'm going to say it was early 90s, 94, 95. And keep in mind, integrated back then, like we talked about, was not integrating of social media because social media wasn't there. It was the integration of direct mail, telemarketing in with the traditional mix of print, radio, things along those lines. So it was bringing those channels together, nothing really digital at that point in time. And so they were familiar with me, the work I was doing at the Digest, And they said, would you like to help us build out this program? And I said, yes, absolutely. So after about 2 or 3 years being a part of that, I left the Digest and became full-time faculty at NYU within that integrated marketing master's degree program. And that just pulled my whole career differently, trajectory into academia, loved it. And, around the year 2000, as you know, the disruption was the web. So I was dealing with that whole disruption while I was teaching. And as I like to say, and I always get a chuckle out of it, before the web, us academics were the gatekeepers of the information. Like I said to you the other day, I would go in front of the classroom and everybody's at attention, with their pens in their hand and their paper and they're writing everything down because it was either me or the book. That was the only place they could get their info for the most part. And so that just shifted everything in the whole dynamic in the classroom where I was no longer kind of that gatekeeper anymore. So it's like, how do I work with this? How do I get the kids to maximize the use of the web and bring that into my teaching? And now, again, we talked AI is doing it again and shifting everything for everybody, And again, I was just talking academia with respect to that part. But I loved it, loved teaching. I published a book with another, he was the department chair at Western Connecticut State University. So we published a book called Optimal Database Marketing with Sage Publications, which is a legit publisher. That was a long process. I think we went through 3 publishers before we got Sage. And then that was about a 2-year process of all about database marketing. It's actually you can still purchase it on Amazon. My royalty checks are about $5 now, but back in the day, it was pretty big because it was kind of the definitive book that a lot of universities used. I love the world, but that was kind of my trajectory getting pulled in. And hopefully that answered your question, I think, Sean. But
totally.
Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned the gatekeeper thing. So when I went back to school in the late 2000s, I had at SIUE, I had a professor who he would get up and he was marketing professor. He would kind of say, I wonder, and he would wonder about something out loud. And I would just put it in Google and look it up and give him the answer. And he hated that. He was so used to being able to pontificate in front of the class and for us to go, oh, wow, that's a really good question. Instead of getting an easy answer. And
Right. No, well, I felt like I can remember having conversations with some of my colleagues at NYU. I feel like I'm going to be tested by the students or, they're checking everything I'm saying. And now, you know what? I kind of beat them to the gun. When I walk into the classroom, I'm logging into obviously, Canvas. I'm logging into ChatGPT, logging into my Google Gmail, and I got chat right there. So, because let's get real. Nobody knows everything. And, and nor did we ever know everything. So if we're chit chatting, I'm saying, well, I don't know if Google made that change or not. Let's go in and I'll go right to chat and pull that up. We'll kind of talk about it and kind of take it from there. So, that's how, you got to work within the environment, right? So,
And I think it's really valuable to say to students, I don't know, but let's find out. And teach them how to use the tools correctly. Because in the world we're in today, that's how we find out.
Well, one of my students this year, Sean, he does search, SEO and paid search for about 5 hotels. So because I don't have access into a live paid search portal because I'm not running any paid search campaigns, I can pull up screenshots. And so I actually had one of my students get up and he kind of went through, some of the stuff he's doing, some of the testing he's doing for the students. And, that's cool. I kind of learned a few things, asked him some questions. And so it was, I learned something that day too. So kind of cool.
Yeah, it's always great I always tell students, I'm going to come from this class learning more about what we're talking about than maybe you even are, because you guys are going to ask me really sharp questions. So they don't always appreciate that, because it's like, hey, you're supposed to be teaching us. But
well, it's funny, and you were at that session yesterday that Mike Alton did on AI. But I was doing a recertification program for high school teachers about a month ago. They have to learn continuing ed credits or whatever. So they had asked me to talk about AI in the classroom for high school teachers and how to utilize it with high school kids. And I can remember one of the teachers said, well, the parents like were yelling at me at one point saying, why am I paying you to use chat? You're supposed to be the expert. You don't, and it's like, that's not the right way to look at it. And, Mike, I think hit it the nail
Hmm.
on the head yesterday. It's really how you use it. We don't use it
Totally.
anymore just to write stuff. You use it as your assistant and to help you create and craft better, delivery and thoughts and all that sort of stuff. And, I'm surprised. I was looking at your questions. And I was thinking
Yeah.
now, I was thinking, maybe I'll feed your questions into chat to see if it can come out with some interesting insights for me to say. I ended up not doing it because I thought, I'm not sure this is going to really work per se because it's a little too personal. But,
I won't say who, but one of our guests actually did that.
oh,
He,
is
he
that
put him into
right?
Claude, and he didn't do it to give him answers, but he did it to make sure he was prepared for the questions. And
Got
I thought
it.
it was
Got
really
it.
smart of him, actually.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah. I was going to do it, but I mean, it's
Mhm.
like, yeah, I don't know, because this is kind of personal with my journey and all that sort of stuff. But yeah,
Totally.
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
and one of the things, so along that journey, you have seen the rise of digital marketing, right? So when I learned marketing skills back in 2008, 2009, like they were not about digital. We didn't learn
right,
anything digital
right,
in
yeah,
classroom. I
right,
think I took one class where we were talking a little bit about the web, but that was
right,
it.
yeah,
And
right.
so digital has really taken over marketing. So how do you help students stay current with topics like that? Because we had somebody yesterday at the conference say, "Hey, I'm a student, and why is marketing curriculum so stodgy? Why
Right,
isn't it teaching
right,
us this
right.
stuff?" So, how do you
Yeah.
help the students to stay current on that?
No, I mean, I really appreciate that question because when I started, and I think that's why UMSL brought me in 2013, because they had no digital curriculum. The one course was called Internet Marketing, which I hated the title. I changed
Hmm.
it. I took over the class and I changed it to Digital Marketing Strategies. Um, and I think you're right. I think some of it is some of the content you need specialists to teach it. Those that have been in the field, like my CRM class is taught by Mindy Cohen, who's in the industry. I don't know if any of my tenured faculty can necessarily teach it to the extent that she does, where she gets them certified. She understands the applications of things. So I think that is a challenge for just not us, our university, but I think every university. It's like these are very applied sort of skill sets, and a book is just not going to teach it per se or be able to stay on top of it quickly enough without changing the additions all the time. So, I mean, for me, it's I need to stay on top of it. I need to be reading, HubSpot's blog, subscribing to all different e-newsletters to stay on top of the latest, going to chat to figure out.
Hmm.
So, every semester I'll go into chat now and I'll say, here's my current deck. These are changes I made since last time. Tell me what are some other changes I need to kind of highlight to the students here that I'm missing out on. Cite your sources, give me the articles, that sort of stuff. So I'm ensuring that I'm teaching them what they need to know, going out the door. I mean, generative search is like totally different these days, or optimization in that regard. Um, and it's just you got to be diligent about it, as you know, and just try to stay on top of it. So the one thing we just did, which I think I mentioned to you,
Hmm.
is, and again, I had to get approval from all faculty. That's how we work. So we're a team. Um, I really wanted to make digital marketing strategies a required course for my marketing majors. All the faculty were 100% on board. We went through the process, did curriculum mapping. So anytime we make a change in academia, you realize we do move a little slow at times. And that's not necessarily a bad thing because they want to make sure any change we're making, which affects thousands upon thousands of kids, is the right change to make. So, the process took about 9 months to a year to kind of get this through, and it's going to finally be implemented in the fall. But digital strategies will now become required. Had to do a complete curriculum mapping where we're in which classes are dealing with which skill sets. and at what level, Sean? I know I'm going into a
Mhm.
lot of detail, but you're
Yeah.
familiar with it because you teach too.
Hmm.
Is this class introducing, is it developing, or is it helping the student master this topic? And so, you need to make sure that all the classes are mapped correctly. And the ones that are helping the student master, those typically tend to be the required courses, in a way. So, your academic teams will ensure that you've laid that all out correctly. So I'm just excited at all the
Yeah.
changes we made in marketing. The other thing we did, which I think a lot of other schools are starting to do, and I don't know if SIUE is doing it too, is we have removed a lot of prereqs that are not really beneficial to our business students. I'm not going to go into which ones per
Hmm.
se because I don't want to cause any
Yeah.
problems. But you remember when you went to school, this, why am I taking this class or why am I taking this class? So the whole idea was to give the students back those credit hours so they could take them within their discipline of study. So instead of taking this other class, which has nothing to do with their degree, now they can take another marketing class and it not count against them, if you know what I mean.
Oh,
So,
totally.
and you know what? That's what we've got to do these days because students are concerned with the cost of education, the time it takes to get the degree. So I think it's even more important that we make sure the rubber meets the road for every dollar they're spending. And I don't know if SIUE is kind of doing this as well, kind of, and kind of relooking at that, or if you're involved in those sort of conversations.
I'm not as an adjunct, but I hear about it because my wife's an academic advisor.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah,
and
that's
and
right. That's right.
yeah, and the funny thing is, and what, by the way, why this is of interest, I think, to our audience is because a lot of marketers, when they're out in the field and they're hiring people right out of college, they want to know that they're trained, right?
Oh,
And
absolutely.
and so
Absolutely.
I hear from professional marketers all the time, like, why
Yeah.
aren't you guys updating the curriculum? Why
Right.
aren't you having
Right.
more professionals come in and speak, or
Right.
things like that?
Yeah.
I take that
Yeah.
feedback to heart.
Yeah.
But at SAUE, I know part of the discussion too is how do we make college more affordable? And does that mean
Right.
maybe looking at different ways of doing programs, where we
Right.
can try to make them more condensed, or we can try to make them more jam-packed in terms of a schedule so that students aren't having to go for 4 or 5 years to get that full
Right.
degree
Right. Right.
when, they want to get out and start
Yeah.
working.
Yeah. No, I
So
mean,
yeah,
a
it's
couple of
a big
things.
debate.
Yeah, I mean, when I started
Mhm.
at UMSL in 2013 and I created digital strategies, I can remember one of my advisory board members, Amy Warren, I think was interviewing one of my students because she works at a search agency, and she was blown away that he knew about search. And that's because I was teaching a digital strategy. She said, "Oh my goodness, no other." I'm shocked that you were being taught search in school. So that's a good thing. And I think I said to you the other day, I
Mhm.
mean, I got to the point where I was saying to myself, I can't let my students walk out the door without knowing Google Analytics, SEO, paid search, email marketing. It's like I'm doing them a disservice if I let them walk out the door. That's why I really felt the class had to be a required class for them because, as you know, that's 75% of the budget is digital and social media marketing. It's no longer traditional.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, and
absolutely.
and so you and I are both going through this right now, as with many other marketing faculty, where we're having to learn in real time how to talk about AI in the classroom. And
Right,
like
right.
I wrote an AI usage policy that we don't have a standard one yet. I had to
Yeah,
write one. I submitted it and
same
said,
thing
hey,
here.
yeah,
Yeah,
anybody want to
yeah,
use this? My
yeah.
policy is use AI but disclose it, because that
Sure.
way,
Yeah,
if it's wrong, then you're not
right,
on the
right,
hook.
right, right.
and
Absolutely.
and I
Yeah,
think that's the ethical way to use it. And so I encourage my students to use it. But then I had to change all my curriculum. I'm no longer requiring papers. Now we do presentations, and
okay.
they're maybe on YouTube or maybe on Zoom. But
So are you have okay, so I'm curious, Sean, are you
mhm.
having them then record for you kind of they're facing the camera and you can tell if they're reading something or whatever or
And you know what? Even if they are, it's kind of just like in this podcast here, where even if you were reading on ChatGPT off the side, you're still going to show yourself in that. You're still going to
that's
tell me
true.
what you
That's
know.
true.
I'm
Yeah,
going to be
yeah. If
able
I'm
to tell if
sitting
it's
here
robotic
reading
or
my
not.
notes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I got you. I got
and
you.
and that's my philosophy. I think we're moving into an era where you need to be willing to go on camera and be face to face with people,
Sure,
because the
sure.
technology is going to require that. So we might as well get students ready
Yeah,
for that,
yeah,
to be able to apply their knowledge in real time. And
right,
that's I'm not every member of our faculty is doing that. Some of them still
right.
do papers, and some of them are
Yeah,
really aggravated about ChatGPT and other
yeah,
platforms.
right.
But my point is, you know what? We're doing Microsoft 365 on campus. They can use Copilot. They're encouraged to use Copilot.
Sure, Sure.
why wouldn't they? And
Right.
so let's teach them to use it correctly, the way they're going to use it in the workforce, and not
Right.
in a way where we're making them cheat, in
Yeah.
order
Yeah. Yeah.
to do what they're going to do anyway.
Right.
But
Right.
not everybody shares that philosophy. Of course, it's a
No,
big
no,
debate.
no. Yeah, yeah. I mean,
But yeah.
I totally agree with you 100%. We're
Mhm.
doing the students a total disservice if we're not teaching them how to use it effectively, what's going to be expected of them when they're on the job. And again, Mike Alton yesterday on his presentation, again, hit the nail on the head. I exactly do that. Even when I'm using chat, I teach my students when you set up a problem, then say, before you come back to me, ask me 3 questions that you need further information on. And then that starts to create that dialogue to help, get deeper insight and better solutions at the end of the day. But yeah, I've been a believer in chat from the start, letting my students use it. They just have to disclose. I'm fine with it. But, I tell them I don't want them to start, with chat. You come to chat with what your thoughts are and then start kind of ideating back and forth. But yeah, we're going to work through this a lot. When I was with the high school teachers that I mentioned a month ago, I said, how many of you are not allowed to even use it within the classroom with the students? And I'd say half of them said they were not
Mhm.
allowed. And I said, well, you need to go back to your principal and you need to tell them that's just not good, because, if they're going to go to college, I would love for them to have a little bit of hands-on of how to use it responsibly. But yeah, yeah.
Believe me, my kids are teenagers. Believe me, they tell me stories all the time about kids that have Apple Watches that are,
Right,
that
right.
earphone that's
Yeah.
piping them information, or they're
Oh,
using it
goodness.
whether they are allowed to or not.
Wow, wow. Back like in the old days when we were kids, you'd write on your wrist or
Right.
something, ink on your pen, or not that I
Programming,
ever did. Not
and
that I ever did
calculating.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's crazy, crazy.
All right. Well, that was the end of part 1 of our interview. And wow, are you excited for part 2? Because we're going to go ahead and post it up tomorrow, just to keep things going, because time is of the essence. We want to make sure people are aware of this conference that is coming up. Again, this is the Midwest Digital Marketing Conference. We're going to talk a lot more about it in part 2. But in the meantime, I want you to go to bestmarketingconference.com. Check this conference out. If you can make it, please come. It's not that expensive, but it is worth your time. It's 2 days of great material, great speakers, great people. I'll be there. Perry's going to be there. You get a chance to really get a chance to rub elbows with some awesome Midwest marketers. And it's April 29th and 30th of this month. So beyond that, I want to thank Dr. Perry Drake for being on. I'm excited to share part 2 of this interview with you tomorrow. In the meantime, check out the show notes for all of his contact information, and we will see you at the next one. So thanks so much. I'm Sean in St. Louis, and this has been the Marketing Gateway, and we will see you next time.